Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit now with our 2020 Census Operations update. We have three presenters, and I like to say, leading into Brian's on our LUCA program, that means the census is in production. So we thank him for taking the lead in getting 2020 operations underway, and I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Deb. We haven't presented on LUCA in a couple of years to this audience, so I wanted to give a brief background on the program. Based on concerns of undercounts from the 1990 census, they evaluated what happened in 1990, and people believe that there are some incomplete issues with our address list. And as the address list is one of the frames to our census, Congress decided to act to their credit, and they passed the Census Address List Improvement Act of 1994, which became Public Law 103-430. And that act did two things that strengthened our address frame. One is it authorized the United States Postal Service to share their addresses with us. So for the last over 20 years, we've been getting updates from the post office at least twice a year to help maintain and improve our address list on a yearly basis. And the second thing it did is it authorized the Census Bureau to share our address list with tribal, state, and local governments. And not just authorized it, but required us to offer the opportunity to do it before the census. So it was implemented in support of the 2000 census for the first time, and then it was later refined to support the 2010 census, and we're in the throes of it now for the 2020 census. So in short, what LUCA is a voluntary opportunity for tribal, state, and local governments to review and comment on our address list. So it allows them to provide addresses, to delete or change the geocodes of addresses, to move the location of an address. And so it's an important opportunity to get input from our stakeholders on, and the people that assign the addresses and create the addresses, and they can provide input to us. So what's new for the 2020 LUCA program? There's several kind of enhancements that we're excited about for the program. One is we're offering a streamlined participation method. We had three options last time that confused participants to some extent and made it very complicated to participate. So we've took some effort to kind of refine the program and make it simpler for our participants. We're providing our digital address list in a more standard format. We're providing our address list in a CSV, comma delimited text file that's easy to import into a text viewer, editor, spreadsheet software, database software. Last time it was a pipe delimited text file, and about half of our help desk calls were about the pipe delimited text file. So just getting comma delimited text files in there makes it a lot easier on our partners and on our support desk. Another big thing that we're doing is we're including ungeocoded address records as part of our LUCA address list for state and county partners. And I want to expand on this a little bit. So when we receive our Postal Service addresses, they provide the state and county that the address is in. It's up to us to figure out what tract and block the address is in. And in some cases, we're unable to do so in our automated fashion. So we have some, we're just standing up some in-office tasks to geocode these ungeocoded addresses. In LUCA 2010, our LUCA partners geocoded 4.5 million ungeocoded addresses without seeing them. They weren't on their address list, but the addresses they provided us matched with existing ungeocoded records, so we geocoded them. So that was a great benefit from LUCA 2010. What we've decided, and right now, because of some of our address maintenance efforts that we've done over the past 4 or 5 years, we only have 2.6 million ungeocoded records. And what we're going to do is provide those addresses to our state and county partners because we know what state they're in, we know what county they're in. So if we provide those ungeocoded records, we can call them out basically and say, we believe these are good address records, but we don't know where they belong. And it could help focus a partner's LUCA review where we may be missing the streets or where we may be missing some of the aspects that allow us to geocode the record. We are requiring multi-unit structure identifiers this time around. In the past, we'd have allowed partners to provide false within-unit identifiers. So if there was an apartment complex with 10 units, they knew there were 10 units, but they didn't know what the units were designated as, such as apartment 1, apartment 2. They could just give us false numbers like *1, *2, and then we would go out and do in-field validation of that. We're actually going to require our partners to give us the within-unit structure, the actual within-unit structure, so we can deliver to it more efficiently. We're including the Census Bureau residential structure coordinates. I'm probably most excited about this new addition to the LUCA program. Over the past 4 years, we've been working with our tribal, state, and local governments through the GSS program, where tribal, state, and local governments have provided us their address list. And we've been using it to enhance our master address file, along with the delivery sequence file updates from the post office. And they've not only provided addresses, but a lot of them have provided structure coordinates, so a map spot indicating where this address is. And we have actually realigned over 58 million of our map spots to the local partners' files, or to their location. A lot of our map spots were located on the edge of roads when we took the handheld device and got the GPS coordinates. Most of these are on rooftops. And so we've done an excellent job of realigning our data to our partners' data. So for us to be able to provide this back to them, they can now take our address list that we provide in LUCA, overlay it with theirs, and actually see on a map that our points are lining up with their points, and then quickly identify where we may be missing addresses. So we think this is a really good addition to the program, and we're looking forward to seeing how our partners benefit from it. And we're also allowing partners to submit coordinates back to us. In the past, we required them to give us when they provided an address to us, they would provide the state, county, tract, and block code. If partners have the lat-long coordinates for those addresses, they can, in lieu of providing the block codes, they can just provide us with the coordinates. And then the last thing that I'm going to talk about today, that improvement is a more recent improvement, is we're allowing partners to submit non-city style addresses as long as they provide coordinates. So non-city style addresses have always been complicated for us because they're almost impossible to match at an address record level. So if we get an address that says, Brick Rambler on the corner of, Maple and Elm, we have to match that against something we have that may be similar, it may not be similar. Because we have these structure coordinates, where our structure coordinates are in really good shape through the GSS and other processes, we think we can use our structure coordinates to match. So if our partners provide non-city style addresses with lat-long coordinates, then we'll do a spatial matching instead of just an address matching. So we're really excited about that. So where are we at now? We've just completed our advance notice mailing. So what our advance notice mailing was basically we wanted, a year before the LUCA program, we wanted to send out information to our tribal, state, and local governments saying that this program's coming. Prepare for it, budget for it, do what you need to do. And so we provided an information guide that described the program. It described what they would need to do to get ready, how they could prepare, steps they can take, along with the schedule, a high-level schedule. It also included just a letter and a contact information update form. And we asked people whether they had updates to the contact information form or not to provide that back to us, so we knew they got the letter, because then we would follow up with a reminder mailing if we didn't get that back. And what really surprised us was that before our reminder mailing, we got almost 40,000 contact information update forms back. So we mailed out 83,000. And 83,000 is more than the number of governments we have. We have just over 39,000 governments. We mailed to multiple contacts within a government, so our GSS partners, former LUCA contacts, and BAS contacts that we have. And so, we're at right now, probably 4 weeks after the mailing, or actually a little more than 4 weeks after the mailing, but just a week after the reminder mailing went out, we have 46,000 contact information update forms that were returned. covering over 27,000 governments. So 27,000 governments have responded to us saying, you know, we've got the LUCA Advance Notice mailing, and here's our updated contact information. And one quick add-on is we looked through this yesterday, and of the 50 state governments, 49 of them responded to the contact information update forms. I'm not going to say which one didn't respond. But the one that didn't respond, I've already spoke to at a state data center meeting. So the state data center liaison's aware of it, and they're very engaged actually in the LUCA program. They just didn't have anybody respond to our contact information update form. So we're really excited about that. I think people are engaged and are excited about the program. So another thing we did was we opened up the LUCA Geographic Program Support Desk. And then through the Geographic Program Support Desk, we received about 903 calls so far. And we have three tiers of help desk. One is our initial help desk at our National Processing Center. Tier 2 is not stood up yet. That'll be stood up when we actually do the program next year. And then Tier 3 is our regional office geographer support, who have, most of them have 2 decades worth of LUCA experience behind them and can answer just about anything LUCA related. So 903 calls have come in, 84% have been handled by the Tier 1 support, and most of the calls are about how do I update my contact information form, or what is LUCA, and what is the schedule, our top 3 calls we got. And then the other thing we've done, which I'm going to get into on the next slide, is we've posted our address block count list on the LUCA website. And so this is another new thing that we're doing this decade that we haven't done before. And so I'll talk about that on the next slide and how important that is. So we're in the process of preparing to create LUCA materials and process the returns. There's a lot of programming and software design that goes into that. We're also refining our process to match LUCA records to the MAFTIGER system, and we're not just matching LUCA records to our address frame, we're matching them to administrative records and also GSS records that our partners have given us in the first place. So we have a wealth of data that our partners have already given us, and so we can match back to those to make sure they're not giving us some same addresses that they might have already indicated as non-residential. So the address count list. We've just posted the address count list on our LUCA website, and anybody can go to this. It's open to the public. And you can go and download the count of addresses by block for every government in the nation. So every tribal government, state, county, place, MCD. You can pull up their count list and see by block how many addresses and group quarters do we have in each block for that community. And so what's exciting about this is normally they don't really get this data until they get their LUCA materials. And so by having this data early, they can actually start preparing for the LUCA program a year in advance. So they can start looking at areas that they have concern that maybe we have overcoverage or undercoverage on. And they can start looking at their address data for that area and find out what's going on here. So I want to point out an example. This is Prince George's County, Maryland, where we're all here today. And if you look at the address count list there are basic geocode columns on the left, the state code, county code, tract code, block code, and also a block GeoID. That block GeoID allows our higher tech governments to join that to our partnership shapefiles, our public shapefiles, the block shapefiles, and map that or do what they want with it. And then we have the total number of residential addresses in that block and the group quarters. So if you look at the third one down, block 3002, there's 0 residential units but 18 group quarters. And that might cause somebody to think, what's going on here? And so if we go to the next slide, they could use either our shapefiles, our public shapefiles that are online, or TigerWeb, which anybody can use. TigerWeb functions, I want to say, similar to Google Maps, where you can zoom into an area and bring up the block layer and determine that, oh, block 3002 is the University of Maryland campus. And that makes sense that there would be 18 group quarters and no single-family housing units there. And so it doesn't take a lot of sophistication to be able to use this data. You could even go in the reverse direction, where you could zoom into an area where there's new growth in your community, zoom in Tiger Web, find the block number, and then look at our count list to say, are we keeping up with that geography, keeping up with those counts or that new growth area? If we are, great. If not, you want to register and participate in Luca and give us that data. So we're excited about these new tools that are out there and available right now, a year on from when we actually send out our Title 13 Luca materials. And then the other thing we've done is we've enhanced our geocoder tool. So we have a geocoder tool that's been out for a while now. It's for public use. And we had it limited to the number of records that I think you can only upload 1,000 records at a time to batch. And what this does is it'll take a partner's address list at the time up to 1,000 records, and you could upload it, and then you'd run the tool, and then it would apply our census geography if we could match it to our address ranges and street names in Tiger. So it's not a math match, it's a non-Title 13 process where we're matching to our streets, not our addresses. And so before Luca, or before this process, you could upload as many as 1,000 records and then get our geocode. So it would return the state code, county code, tract code, block code. What we've done is updated it so they could handle 10,000 records at a time. And it may not seem like a lot, but actually that covers 90% of our governments have fewer than 10,000 addresses in their community. We get kind of insulated here in the DC area, the large government sizes, but most of our Luca partners are smaller governments. And so they could upload their entire address list. And actually, if they wanted to split their address list in half and submit it twice, if they had a 20,000 record file, that covers actually 95% of our governments. So what do the other 10 or 5% do? We're providing an alternate path where they can upload their file through a secure web incoming module. It's our secure FTP site that we use for GSS and BAS and other partnership programs. They'll be able to upload their file through this system, and we'll do an overnight batch process to geocode their addresses for them. And then once they get this, they can start comparing it to our block count list. So this is another tool you can use to start preparing for your Luca review early. And last, but certainly not least, I mentioned the non-city style addresses. This actually was a recommendation from our regional office director, our regional directors out in Denver, where they were really concerned about our Luca participants in the desert Southwest or in Alaska, where they're predominantly non-city style addresses. What are they going to do in Luca? And at the time it was, well, they could re-geocode our addresses, but they can't really add addresses because we can't match them. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to allow them to add addresses as long as they provide us the structured coordinates. And you can either do this through a GIS file or on our address list with the coordinates, or just put a dot on the map where you think the address is. So we are providing paper maps still and paper address list for people that choose to use paper. And they'll be able to provide the map spot and give us either the location description, the rural route, or a highway contractor route address. We're not accepting PO boxes because we still can't link that to a household. But we're excited about this, and I think this is going to help a lot of communities participate in Luca that normally wouldn't be able to do much with the program. So in the last slide, where are we at now? I've mentioned we've sent out our advance notice mailing and our advance notice reminder mailing. Luca promotional workshops have begun, and so I want to take a moment just to give credit to our field regional office geographers who are severely working really hard. They're kind of understaffed and doing a lot of promotional outreach and on their own. We also have our Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs participating in these workshops. We have the data dissemination staff participating in workshops, and we have geography division folks doing the workshops. So it's kind of, it takes a village type of thing, and this is what's happening right now. We're utilizing all the tools we have available to promote the program. And so we're excited about that. You can go to our website right now, and the Luca website, and bring up the list of current promotional workshops that are out there, promotional events that are out there, and that's going to be updated on a weekly basis, and we're getting ready to redesign our webpage as well, and we'll have a kind of a more thorough promotional section on it. And then the Luca invitation and registration goes out in July, and the deadline to register will be December 15th. So we have a long window between July and December 15th to get people registered, so that's going to be a big focus during that time period. Then we'll start training workshops in October. We usually have around roughly 4-hour workshops on how do you do your Luca review, where we train our partners. And then in February to April of 18, participants will review and update the Census Bureau's address list participating in the Luca program, and then we'll be processing Luca submissions from February to September of 18. So we've I think, come a long way, but we still have a long way to go, but we're excited about it.
Do we have any quick questions for Brian?
Real quick, and for anybody, forgive my ignorance, but disclosing the block, the housing unit counts of blocks, that's not new
Not in the format that we have. So we have
to
on
the public? Anybody
block,
can
block
download
counts
it?
have been on American Fact Finder, so one can get them if they go through the process of kind of downloading the right files and then compiling to their geography. But we've basically made it really more easily accessible, and then the group quarters wasn't part of that either. So separating out the group quarters and the housing units was something new. But in a sense, we've made it easier for our partners to pull the data down.
But you don't have to dummy the block counts or anything like that?
Oh, no, it's not Title 13, correct, because that data is, we went through the Disclosure Review Board. We did this as part of our geographic support system feedback that we provide our partners. And so it's very similar to that feedback.
No? Okay.
One more.
Thank you. Oh, where?
Thanks. Tricia Durr, Self. It's almost getting to be crowdsourcing, which is cool. The Luca, this is like the section of the PMR on actual 2020 operations. So I'm trying to think of the other 2020 operations that have already begun. One of which, of course, is the in-office address canvassing. So I'm just wondering, what's the interface between these, what's going on in Luca, all the new data you're getting dynamically, if there's any quantification of that, and then how this could be fed productively into the in-office part of address canvassing?
Okay, so I have a 30-minute answer to that, but I'll try and narrow that down to a 30-second answer. So that's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. In-office canvassing, first and foremost, is going to be the validation tool for Luca. So when we get our addresses in for the Luca program from our partners, we're going to do some basic matching to admin records and GSS records in the MAF, and then what the fallout will go to in-office canvassing. We're also looking at using some of the knowledge that the imagery review process has developed to determine, we have a good sense on where there's growth, where things are built out. And based on that, we can identify whether Luca submissions make sense to us. If we're getting addresses in a block that we think is built out, then let's flag that for further review. If we're getting addresses in a block that we expected growth, maybe we can just accept that and move on. And so we are using both the tools of the in-office canvassing as well as in-office canvassing itself to support the Luca program.
Good, great. Thank you, Brian. Now we'll move on to our second topic in the 2020 program updates. I'm happy and really pleased that Jenny Kim is here to tell you about all the exciting things we're doing in the language program.
All right, well, I'm very happy to update you on our work in planning for the 2020 language program. So what I'll do today is to give you a high-level update on our language work. That includes our mid-decade research and testing, some of the innovative approaches that we're taking for 2020, as well as some examples of our non-English materials. So the role of the 2020 language program is to first identify ways to reduce barriers, language barriers to enumeration, and then to determine the optimal level of support. And it's really important that we optimize the content of the non-English materials through quality translations, review, adjudication, and pre-testing, and to also ensure meaningful translation of these materials. In the next slide, you'll see that we have been very busy over the decade. In 2015, we established the National Advisory Committee Working Group on Language. And throughout the decade, we have been monitoring language trends and changes over time. And we have deployed language strategies throughout our various field tests, especially with the 2016 census test, which served as our language testing vehicle. And all of these efforts included our pre-testing of our non-English materials in the form of, for example, cognitive and usability testing, focus groups, expert review, and et cetera. And in addition to these activities, we have consulted with different agencies on their language operations, such as the FBI, the State Department, Homeland Security, as well as having conversations with industry professionals through organizations such as American Translator Association, Interagency Language Roundtable. Now, a major recommendation that came out of 2010 was our need for a comprehensive approach to translation. So in response to this, and also in partnership with the Census Bureau's Improving Operational Efficiencies Initiative, we created a brand new branch at the Census Bureau that would oversee all of the translation-related work at the enterprise level. And in setting up this branch, we adopted industry best practices and standards into the work, and also hired professionals from the industry. And Jason Cobb, who is the chief of this branch, is in the audience today. Jason, could you wave just for a moment? Thank you, he's back there. We actually recruited him. He is previously from the State Department, where he managed translations at their Office of Language Services, and he's also a graduate of the Middlebury Institute of International Relations, where he has a master's in translation localization management, and he speaks 3 different languages. And to further embarrass him a little bit more, he was invited by the American Translators Association recently to serve on their Government Division Leadership Council, and today counts as his first day as a council member. So congratulations, Jason. And then sitting next to Jason is Chris Silva, who heads up our translation and terminology research within the branch, and she comes to us with 20 years of translation experience, and she has also been the adjunct faculty member at the Middlebury Institute. So she is also a trilingual individual who speaks Spanish, English, and Portuguese, and we are thrilled, as you can see, to have both Jason and Chris on our team with us. Now, in planning for the 2020, we also took into account another major recommendation to thoroughly pre-test all of our non-English materials. So accordingly, we began testing earlier in the decade and have included all of our public use materials. We are also introducing the use of technology in our translation approaches, specifically the use of translation memory software, which is commonly referred to as TM. This came about when we were surveying different agencies and how they were going about the language production work, and there was this software that other agencies were using that they introduced us to. So TM is a computer program, and it's widely used in the translation industry, and it stores all previously translated text into our database. So whenever we are translating new documents, it populates the already translated terminology into the document, and it identifies within that document in what part of the document still remains in need of the translation. So this obviously increases our consistency throughout terminology, as well as quality and efficiency in our translation. So I'm actually going to share some screenshots of this software in a moment, but I do want to mention that our use of the TM is not to be confused with machine translation, such as Bing Translator or Google Translate, that automatically translates without any human intervention and often produces structural and grammatical errors. So in the next slide here, you are going to see what the software looks like. So within the software, when we import the document that needs to be translated, it'll automatically display the original text on the left that you see there, and then the translator's work appears on the right. So they're actually able to look at a side-by-side or line-by-line comparison of the source text and what they are translating. Now, if you look at the next slide, now if this is a document that has already been translated and the English text has been revised and we need to revise the translation, this software will actually automatically track the changes for the translator so we don't have to go through the manual process of figuring out what else needs to be translated, and then it'll identify where the translations need to occur. Now, within the software as well, we have the ability to search for specific terms that have already been translated. So in this example, I'm searching for the term respondents. So once I put in that into the search tool, the software will pull up the list of cases where this term was previously translated. So when you look at the left side, it'll pull up the English version using that term, and then the translated version in the middle, and then the title of the document as a reference to pool in which the documents were using these terms in the translation. And what's really great about this tool is that the terminals that we use go through a rigorous process of translation, review, and as well as pre-testing. So once we have that, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and try to create other translations when we can keep everything in the term base. So this is going to be a very exciting tool that we'll be able to use for 2020, and we've already begun the implementation process. So now that we've seen some of our innovations, I'm going to show you some types of support that we're planning for 2020. So on this slide here, what you're seeing here is the support that we provided in 2010, which is on the left side, and then our expanded approaches that we're planning for 2020 on the right side. So I'm going to focus your attention to the highlighted items on the right. With the deployment of the Internet Instrument for 2020, we are going to provide non-English versions of the Internet Instrument in more languages than we did for the 2010 questionnaires. The languages that are available on the Internet Instrument will also be available for census questionnaire assistance. And non-English interviews will be made available throughout the entire operation of CQA. Our field enumeration instrument that will be used during the NERFU operation will also have a bilingual capability in 2020. This is different from 2010 where it was English only. We are also going to expand on our language assistance guides, and we have two different modes that will be available for 2020. One, a video format, as well as continuing to provide the paper format as we did in 2010. What you're seeing here are some screenshots of our non-English Internet Instrument that was used during the 2016 census test. On the left, you see the Spanish screen. On the right, you see a Korean screen. In the middle, you see the English screen with the language drop-down menu. I do want to note that what you're seeing here is the platform that we used in 2016, and it is different from the eCase platform that we're using for 2020, but it captures the same idea of having multiple language options and the same look and feel across languages. We will also have, obviously, the census questionnaire assistance in the same languages as the internet that I've already mentioned. So on the right side is what you see what we call the CQA insert, and this is included in the mailing packages. So the respondents will receive this insert in their packages that will direct them to the specific language lines. And as you can see, it has a very simple message for help completing your questionnaire. Call this number, and each of the languages have their unique numbers, and this is written in their language, so they can quickly scan and recognize if that is their language that they speak. Now, turning to the two types of the language assistance guides, this is a conceptual example of the video language assistance guides. In 2010, we had paper language assistance guides in 60 languages that had the look and feel of the paper questionnaire and explained what the questions were asking. With the introduction of the internet questionnaire, we are going to have a video format of the language assistance guides that's going to walk our respondents through the Internet Instrument, and there will be narration and closed captioning in those supported languages, and this will also include American Sign Language. And these will be readily available on the internet and at different partnership events. We will continue to provide our language assistance guides through paper. It will have the same languages that we have available for the video guides, but it will also include Braille and large print. And we will have printed copies available as well as having PDFs available on the internet. Okay, so as I close, I'd like to draw your attention to some reference materials. In 2016, we issued the detailed operational plan for the 2020 language services operation, and that is available online. Later, that we will issue later in this calendar year, are the finalized plans for the 2020 language plan. This will talk about the list of the languages and the types of support and the level of support for these languages. So I hope that this has given you a quick overview of where we're headed for our language operations in 2020, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have. Thank you.
If there's no questions, oh, Ty, of course. How could I think there wasn't going to be a question?
Do you have a target number or minimum number of languages you're kind of shooting for 2020 yet?
Yes, right now what we are planning for is for the Internet instrument to have approximately 10 languages. So that would be the same for the census questionnaire assistance. And for the language assistance guides, we're planning to do around 60 as we did in 2010. 60. Mhm.
Trisha Durr. Yeah, the languages, I know some of the questions on the questionnaire are hard enough to understand in my native language, for example. Residence rules and, overcoverage, undercoverage, those kinds of fine details. And of course, the race and Hispanic question and the new categories for MENA and so on. I mean, these are really hard to comprehend how the psychology of them. I mean, they're very complex, even though they're very, there are not that many questions, but some of these questions are still being tested. So, and I appreciate the fact that you have some expertise that came on board and so on. But I guess my question is, how much more testing is required to ensure the translations of these nuanced categories and issues that you've been testing will, be successful, I guess? How are you measuring for success?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Obviously, with the translation, even if you give a literal translation, unless it is culturally relevant and meaningful, our respondents are not going to fully understand the message that and the questions that we're asking. This is why we have started our multilingual research earlier in the decade, and that was a huge recommendation that came out of our 2010 experience. And we work with RTI International as our multilingual researchers. And with every single language that we produce our materials in, after they have been translated and reviewed and finalized, they help us recruit. So we work with them in recruiting respondents in those language groups, and we simulate the environment as if they are filling out these questionnaires under a census environment. And from that, they give us their feedback. And what we did in 2016 when we deployed the internet questionnaire in English, Spanish, Chinese, and Korean, what we saw in those, what resulted in these questionnaires were results of the feedback that we got from our respondents. We are very intentional about recruiting respondents of the language group, but at different various levels of their language ability. And we make it a point that once they have participated in one part of the testing that they are not utilized again as a respondent, because we want to have people who come in and have not looked at our materials for the before in order to give us their honest feedback. And we also have had focus groups and expert review in which they have given us feedback, and this is what we continue to do. And for the languages that we are planning right now, we are already in the production stage of doing the translation, the review, and we have started testing in the additional languages that we have in addition to the 16 tests.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So to round out our 2020 census operations update, I think we can end with Greg Hanks talking about what I think is a fantastic partnership and the work he has going on with the United States Postal Service.
Thanks, Deb. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm organized in the Geography Division here at Census Bureau, but I'm also leading a new team formed here at the Bureau to coordinate our partnership activities with the United States Postal Service. The goal of my presentation today is to give you a brief overview of the steps we're taking in both organizations to document and expand that partnership, as well as outline several projects currently underway. Before I move on to the next slide, I want to acknowledge Mr. Neil Vereen from the Postal Service, who is representing their organization here today and who has been a vocal champion for this partnership for the last several years. Thanks for joining us, Neil. So for our agenda this afternoon, we'll talk first about mechanics of the partnership itself, then discuss ongoing engagements, and finally highlight the work the Bureau is doing with the Postal Service as part of the 2018 end-to-end census test. The Census Bureau and the United States Postal Service have an active and long-standing partnership. This partnership benefits both agencies by providing opportunities for capacity building and innovation that enables each of us to meet enterprise objectives in our evolving business environments. A key example is the coordination and logistics associated with the delivery of decennial census materials, including invitation letters, census questionnaires, and reminder notices. In 2010, for example, the Postal Service delivered over 100 million census questionnaires on behalf of the Bureau. Another important example includes the Census Bureau's ongoing use of the Postal Service's delivery sequence file, which Mary Ann mentioned earlier this afternoon, to add, change, and delete addresses from our address frame or master address file. On average, the Census Bureau adds over 1 million addresses each year through use of the delivery sequence file. Our recent collaborations have focused on the Census Bureau's use of Postal Service staff and facilities as part of our in-field testing, which I'll discuss in more detail later. So this slide shows how focus areas from both organizations are served by our working together. The Bureau and the Postal Service's partnership has existed for decades and has evolved over time from the delivery of questionnaires to the use of complex data about addressing and deliverability to now focusing on how the Bureau might take advantage of advanced Postal Service technology to increase response rates and reduce costs during the 2020 census. Our expanding partnership requires institutional structure and governance to ensure that it remains a source of innovation and communication. In November 2016, the Postal Service hosted an executive brainstorming session with leadership representatives from the Census Bureau to outline a path for our collaboration leading up to the 2020 census. That session launched the creation of 6 working groups, subject matter themed working groups, co-chaired by both Postal Service and Census Bureau employees that are now serving as consistent, visible forums for communication. Those themed working groups are policy, address and spatial data products, optimizing self-response, partnership, fieldwork and human resources, and modeling. Each of these working groups will maintain a charter and a current list of priority activities and be supported by a central coordination team staffed by both organizations. The coordination team is tasked with creating an enterprise memorandum of understanding that outlines the new institutional structure, the governance around that structure, and an inventory of existing and new opportunities to collaborate. A draft of that MOU will circulate within both agencies starting in May. At a high level, we can discuss all of the Census Bureau's areas of collaboration with the Postal Service under 3 major headings. The categories are mailing and delivery services, data products and services, and workforce services. Those categories can overlap, so where they do, a 4th category is created for cross-cutting activities. Defining the partnership in simple terms like these allows us to realize 2 immediate benefits: laying an understandable groundwork to accomplish and manage near-term priorities, and enabling the development of institutional memory upon which all stakeholders can operate and benefit from in the future. This slide gives some examples of current activities or projects under each of the 3 collaboration headings I just mentioned. Under the mail heading, we are exploring the use of Every Door Direct Mail, or EDDM, which is a Postal Service feature, as a way to target delivery to specific areas or communities without having to provide an address or mailing list. We're also looking to automate the tracing of census questionnaires in the mail stream through the creation of a new system-to-system interface between the Census Bureau and the Postal Service. Under the data heading, Marianne and I have both mentioned now the delivery sequence file on previous slides. You heard Andy mention as well the Census Bureau's use of information about mail deliverability, specifically the undeliverable as addressed file, to identify and remove vacant housing units from the NARFU workload during recent census tests. Finally, under the workforce heading, we've listed some projects that we are considering as part of the 2018 end-to-end census test, and that I'll discuss on the next slide. Looking ahead to the 2018 end-to-end census test, there are several areas where the Postal Service and the Bureau are collaborating. Work is underway to implement a feasibility study of the use of postal carriers as enumerators that I will discuss on the next slide. We're also exploring how the Bureau might use Postal Service facilities to increase awareness, recruiting, and response rates for the test through access to web-enabled kiosks within post offices, a messaging campaign involving signs and materials placed in post offices, and the use of post offices and Postal Service employees to perform identity authentication services for applicants seeking employment as part of the test. Finally, the Bureau is interested in leveraging the Postal Service's informed delivery service, where subscribers can, via email, receive an advanced look at and potentially interact with mail that will be delivered later that day, including their notification postcard for the census. The details of this feasibility study or pilot are still developing, but the goal is to deploy approximately 40 postal carriers as enumerators within 2 zip codes adjacent to, but outside of, the Providence, Rhode Island test site. The postal carriers that participate in the pilot will receive the same training, automation, and kinds of assignments as other enumerators and will conduct enumeration during the non-response follow-up portion of the test. Why are we considering this pilot? Questions about this possibility have been asked numerous times in recent years by members of Congress, as well as other advisory and oversight bodies. The Postal Service maintains a well-trained and experienced labor force that possesses significant public trust and detailed knowledge of the addressing and residential patterns in communities they serve. And the pilot will begin to answer questions around whether the Bureau can leverage this workforce on a larger scale as part of a decennial census. The map on the screen here shows a geographic area created by the Census Bureau called Zip Code Tabulation Area, within and surrounding the Providence test site. Staff from the modeling working group I mentioned earlier are working right now to propose 2 zip codes for this pilot. Those zip codes will be selected from the ring of zip codes that form the perimeter around Providence County. The next deliverable for this pilot is a detailed study plan that will specify objectives and methodology. We anticipate releasing a complete draft of that study plan again in May of this year. And while still in the early stages of development, this pilot has already been a great opportunity for the Postal Service and the Census Bureau to jointly implement an innovative and visible project. We are grateful for their partnership on the pilot and the full portfolio of activities that I mentioned here today. So that concludes my very brief update on the Postal Service Census Bureau partnership, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Greg, one thing you didn't mention about that potential pilot was the wage rates. I know that's been an issue in the past, that the typical postal employee gets a lot more money per hour than the typical enumerator. Have you thought about the issues there?
Thanks, Dan, for that question. Yes, that's as anyone that's heard this discussion can imagine, that's a centerpiece issue in the discussion around the feasibility pilot. That's also a centerpiece issue in the discussion around, is this a possible thing to do at all? So we're going to tackle it head on, Dan. We're still early in discussions around implementing this. There have been a couple different approaches. Again, we're very early on, and I'm not going to cite this as methodology that's been approved yet, but conversations about how and when to use these resources. During the day, during a typical postal route, that may be a difficult thing to do given wage rates and given their other work that they have to accomplish. After hours, as supplemental census staff, where we can still take advantage of the fact that they're approved employees with their knowledge base. So depending on where that lands, that will speak to the realities of the wage difference. But again, I think we need to, that's one of the things we want to speak to in trying this exercise. There's been significant encouragement, I'll say, I won't use the word pressure, to try this test in the field. And I think we have to embrace that component of it and see exactly what does it cost? How much, the Postal Service, like other federal employees, have a wage scale. So you've got your more veteran employees at the top of the scale and the newer employees at the bottom. What does that look like for the folks that we end up using in the field? And so once we have a roster of employees that we use from the Postal Service, we'll get a better handle on what the cost sort of spread could be. But it's definitely a consideration.
Great. All right, thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
And so rolling into the home stretch, it certainly wouldn't be a 2020 PMR without Patty and Autry sitting at the other end of the stage from where I sit to talk about a topic always at the end of the agenda called 2020 System Readiness. So I'll turn it over to my good partner, Autry.
Thank you, Deb. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Patty and I are once again happy to be here to discuss the progress made in relation to the decennial census systems, including the key census enterprise data collection and processing, or CETCAP systems. As you all know, the replanned 2017 census test is underway, and so I'll go over some of the key IT objectives achieved and lessons learned. I'll then go over the transition to the process of getting ready for the 2018 end-to-end census test and the status of key systems supporting that test. Patty will go over the readiness of the CETCAP systems supporting the 2018 end-to-end census test. So the replanned 2017 census test required the deployment of IT systems to support a nationwide sample of about 80,000 households for a self-response only operation. The modes of self-response are internet, paper, and telephone. The internet self-response system and the operational control system, along with the real-time non-ID processing system, RTNP system as we call it, were successfully deployed and are operational in a commercial cloud. If you recall, deployment in the cloud was an objective of ours starting with the 2016 census test, for multiple reasons, including the dynamic provisioning of servers for scalability. However, due to the instability of the cloud chosen for the 2016 census test, we had to make a risk-based decision, as you recall, and went live with an internet self-response system deployed in the DMZ, demilitarized zone of our Bowie data center. We tested an alternate cloud for the 17 census test and made the decision to go live with that cloud based on our test results. Deployment in the cloud means that we are able to not only manage the applications in the cloud, but also the databases, the middleware, backups, load balancers, services, monitoring, etc., in a secure fashion with trusted census.gov URLs through an internet gateway on the census network. A lot of work by many teams across the Bureau resulted in this successful deployment. We are currently assessing if the cloud solution we use for 17 census test would be a viable solution for the 2018 end-to-end census test. The internet self-response system and the operational control system are Pegasus 7 platform-based solutions that we developed and deployed for the first time in production. If you recall, we made the decision to use the Pegasus 7 platform in May of 2016. Stood up work streams starting in July of 2016 to develop these solutions, and in about 6 months, the solutions were developed and released for integration and threat testing and eventual production deployment. Again, a lot of work by many teams across the Bureau. Deployment of systems in the cloud necessitates the need to flow data securely between the cloud and our data center. We achieved that objective through virtual private network or VPN connections and with an enterprise service bus implementing a communication system between our applications in a service-oriented architecture. To support the mode of telephone for self-response, we stood up the infrastructure and system of systems for census questionnaire assistance, working with our contractor partner, GDIT. The CQA agents are successfully using the Pegasus 7 platform-based internet self-response system in the cloud to capture the responses. In order to provide the agents with this capability, we established a secure interface connection between the CQA system and the internet self-response system that's available through authorization and authentication. For the 2020 census operations to be successful, in utilizing the administrative records and the third-party data, a well-architected, high-performing, and secure system that provides streamlined and efficient access to the admin data and the related services required. We therefore built PAIRSys, the production environment for administrative records staging, integration, and storage. We successfully released PAIRSys in support of the 2017 census test as well. In all of our earlier census tests and the current 2017 census test, we deployed various data collection solutions, but in order for us to process the collected response data, we allocated the needed capabilities and requirements to be fulfilled by the Decennial Response Processing System, also called DRPS system. For the first time since its development, DRPS is deployed in support of the 2017 census test and will help us validate the algorithms that will be used to process the 2020 census response data. While we were successful in achieving these IT objectives for the 2017 census test, there are also lessons learned through that process. So we divided into 4 buckets. Under the development and test bucket, again, as I mentioned earlier, the development and release of the eCase platform-based systems, which I consider as the core systems, were accomplished in about 6 months. As typically is done in IT projects, we planned and conducted threat testing in advance of integration testing to get a leg up on testing activities as functionality got released incrementally. We released the systems to production relying on tested threads. In a few instances, we had to release patches to production to improve on a situation that would have been caught through more comprehensive integration testing. So that's a lesson learned. Under the infrastructure bucket, although we are successful in standing up our systems in a commercial cloud, we had to architect the infrastructure and systems using the solutions that are available in the cloud. While the solutions indeed worked for us, not all of them would be our first choice solutions, but obviously we weighed in the pros and cons of alternate solutions and decided to go with the available solutions after comprehensive testing, as the overall cloud solution chosen outweighed a non-cloud solution or any other alternate cloud solution. Another lesson learned is about the deployment of applications to various environments, the development, integrated testing, production, etc. While every patch and every version of applications were released successfully by our administrators, the releases were not automated. We could have saved time through automation. We are working to achieve this objective for the 2018 end-to-end census test. In the data integration bucket, we had incidences during the integration of systems for the 2017 census test where there were gaps in elements of data needed to be made available to the subsequent systems. We realized and fixed situations through testing, but the process of defining the interfaces clearly can improve through a more focused data architecture and data integration effort. To address this lesson learned, we are working with our data architects and engineers to take a data evolution approach as the data travel through various systems from collection to response processing. Under the other category, a lesson that most programs learn is to be ready to react to the unexpected. There were situations that we faced which reiterated the need to be ready for the unexpected. The VPN, as an example, supporting the internet self-response system, was unstable and resulted in multiple, although small, periods of downtime. Respondents could not access the ISR application during the periods of that downtime. We resolved the issue when our internet service provider routed our MTIPS, the Managed Trusted Internet Protocol Service, through Sacramento, California. With the objectives achieved and lessons learned in relation to the 17 census test, we are now transitioning to prepare efficiently for the 18 end-to-end census test. While we onboarded the technical integrator in August of 2016, their scope and involvement starts really with the 2018 end-to-end census test. So we are working very closely with the technical integrator and relying on their added help in the key areas listed on the screen on the left. We issued technical directives to the technical integrator and established a governance process for the execution, analysis, and acceptance of the work and work products resulting from those technical directives. The 2018 end-to-end census test is a very important test for us and is the closest in resemblance to the 2020 census from IT systems perspective. We are therefore very eager to conduct the test and learn from it so we can make necessary adjustments before going live for the 2020 census. Although we conducted the previous census test successfully with available resources, preparing for the 18 end-to-end census test will have added advantages of cloud-based DevOps environment, results of independent assessment by the technical integrator of each of the critical systems, and an opportunity to react based on those results and recommendations, added resources for testing, results of external and internal demand models so we can right-size our infrastructure and simulated data. All of the preparation and testing will of course be happening on an infrastructure that closely resembles and actually may be used for the 2020 census, including a decennial-focused data center. Shown on the screen is the famous solution architecture diagram, which is revised now, reflecting the decisions made and are being made, some of which include descoping the post-enumeration survey operation, descoping some aspects of the integrated partnerships and communication operation, using listing and mapping solution instead of the eCase ALM, replacing ISR, Internet Self-Response, for group quarters with Centurion, and adding the disclosure avoidance system under the umbrella of the decennial response processing system, which is the purple box at the bottom right. On this slide, I'm showing the differences between the earlier version of the solution architecture, which is on the left side for the 2018 end-to-end census test, and the current version on the right, specifically using listing and mapping, LIMA, with MCM, Mobile Case Management Solution, instead of eCase address listing and mapping, and replacing Internet Self-Response for group quarters with Centurion. And here is the change in the same solution architecture, depicting the descoping of the post-enumeration survey operation. I wanted to present a closer look at some of these changes. Now shown on the screen is the second part of the 18 end-to-end census test solution architecture with administrative support services, enterprise-enabling IT support services, and system supporting stakeholder relations. Please note that the C-sharps boxes are now with a green header background, as you can see on the chart. On this slide and the next few slides, the key efforts and/or updates required by each of the key non-SETCAP systems in support of the 18 end-to-end census test are shown. For census questionnaire assistance, we are working with our contractor partner to implement the outbound calling capability, in addition to the functionality of assisting respondents and collecting responses in a customized version of the Internet Self-Response system that we tested as part of this 2017 census test. Census questionnaire assistance system of systems will be deployed in a cloud and will interact with Internet Self-Response systems, which will also be in a cloud. C-sharps will provide the recruiting and selection capability, starting with the recruitment of field staff for the 18 end-to-end census test enumeration operation. The solution will be interfacing with DAPS and Check. We are working with the vendor to establish and test those interfaces, and in parallel, working with our Office of Information Security to obtain the required ATOs. We are working with our technical integrator to enhance the intelligent postal tracking system to meet the scalability requirements of 2020 census. While we successfully use the legacy version of IPTS in the census test, including the 2017 census test, our objective is to enhance the system before we go live for the 2018 end-to-end census test. We acquired vendor services for a learning management system that will be used for training our field staff through an existing Department of Commerce Support Services initiative, Service Desk Technology, and Support Blanket Purchase Agreement. We are working with the vendor and the technical integrator to establish and test the needed interfaces. The rest of the systems listed on this screen are a reuse from previous census tests. I mentioned in the last PMR that we'll use an enhanced version of the American Community Survey tabulation system for the 2020 decennial census. We are applying performance and workflow-related enhancements and establishing interfaces to have it ready for deployment in support of the 18 end-to-end census tests. A word about the unified tracking system. While the objective of UTS is to track and report on the status of various census operations, we've also had the UTS team helping us with the collection and storage of the data from the 2017 census test. Data flowed from UTS to the subsequent systems for processing. In order to streamline the data management process through which all of the paradata, the metadata, and the response data that's collected from the census operations is securely deposited into a repository, in consultation with our Chief Technology Officer, we are establishing a data lake into which all of the data we collect will flow. Various follow-on systems, including the decennial response processing system, will then be given the data they need from this data lake for further processing. I'm showing the fraud detection system on this slide. We have given a technical directive to the technical integrator to strategize with us and build a fraud detection solution for the 2020 census. We have a well-defined plan to implement the solution with a post-collection assessment of the data for fraud, as well as integrating with security so that a security incident, if any, triggers a fraud detection activity. This slide shows the status of non-SETCAP support systems for the 18 end-to-end census tests. While many of these systems are as-is systems, interface updates and scalability updates of some of these systems are required to support the 2020 census, and we are actively working on that. With that, at this time, I'll hand over to Patty McGuire, who will give us an update on the SETCAP systems. Patty?
Thank you, Autry. Actually, my update will be very brief since I know I'm standing between you and your weekend. So this picture depicts SETCAP and the enterprise data collection and processing capabilities provided by SETCAP systems. I show this at every 2020 census PMR as a reminder of what we consider enterprise data collection and processing capabilities. Autry did a very good job of highlighting that SETCAP systems are in production for the 2017 census test, supporting both internet self-response and paper data collection. The SETCAP teams are also working on the enhancements needed to support the 2018 end-to-end test. So SETCAP systems for paper data capture, the universe creation, and the service-oriented architecture had already supported previous census tests. But the 2017 census test is the first test, the first production use of the EK self-response and the survey operational control solutions using the Pega 7 COTS platform. So I think I've told you before, we use an agile Scrum delivery methodology to configure eCase for Census Bureau use. The project teams use an incremental delivery cycle with 3-week sprints, and the product owners, who all come from the 2020 census program, continually review and sign off on the developed eCase functionality. Enhancement work on SEDCAP solutions for the releases to support the 2018 end-to-end test are also underway. Right now, all systems are on track to support that test. It's going to be the first use of the eCase field operational control system and the enumeration system. So a critical requirement, as always with 2020, is to scale to meet their workloads. And the SEDCAP architects and engineers are working closely with the 2020 census staff to ensure that the SEDCAP systems scale to meet their specific requirements. So as I've said every PMR, we actually have already delivered systems successfully to support data collection and processing. But another focus of SEDCAP is to also support proving in new innovative data collection methodologies. The concurrent analysis and estimation model, which supports adaptive design methodology, will be used for the first time in the 2018 end-to-end census test. And the Mojo Route Optimizer is focused on supporting new methodologies for managing field work and re-engineering field operations. It was used in the 2015 and 2016 census tests to prove in those concepts, and work is underway to make the enhancements needed for the 2018 end-to-end test. So I've given you very brief updates on the SEDCAP systems today, and I think as Autry noted, the ISR, and the eCase platform, we had about 6 months to get that into the field and into production, and it's working. And the work is now underway with the 2018 end-to-end test to get those systems ready.
We'll take any questions. Yes, go ahead.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the DevOps component of what you're working on? What kind of solutions does that entail?
Yes, so right now, while we have the development, test, staging, production, and so on environments, in an agile development process, what's desired is to have a DevOps environment where you would have the ability to develop and then in an automated way release the developed components to test. And then when they're ready to go to production after testing, to, typically, as they say, press a button and go to production. That is the DevOps solution that our technical integrator is assisting us to establish in the cloud. And that's the environment that we are transitioning to. And our eCase platform has already moved onto that platform, onto that DevOps environment, starting on the dev side of it already.
Sure. So one quick follow-up. Does that mean configuration management, containerization, or something different?
No, it includes configuration management, release management, and there are quite a few tools that the technical integrator is standing up, and they are in parallel trying to get the required secure ATOs for all of those applications to work with our enterprise systems.
Yes, kudos to you all. You probably wear a 2017 hat, and then a 2018 hat, and then a 2020 hat. I mean, it's very dynamic. So at the recent advisory committee, they really asked some really good questions, I thought. So I was just trying to, rethink some of those. And also thank you for making your slide readable when you expand it. That's really helpful. Okay, I guess my main question is the end-to-endness testing of 2018. For example, earlier we heard about the admin recs and how they're being, there's different loops going on in the operations. When you listen to a presentation like that, do you go, okay, do we have the requirements nailed down for that? And then what is the process for doing that? I know it's always hard, so I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but could you just describe how?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. So that's why we use what is called a service-oriented architecture. We built PERSYS, which is the production environment for administrative records, in a way that allows us to serve the administrative data through services. So no matter when and how they want to use it, as long as they're using the service and they have the permission to use the service, the data is made available to them. As decisions are made, the architecture of serving the data doesn't change. It's the usage of the existing service as part of other operations that needs to be updated. So that's the beauty of the service-oriented architecture. Plus, the data that may need to be acquired to update what we have in the database can also be done in parallel to standing up the system to readily serve the data that's already available. So that's how we address that. So I'm fine with decisions being made at a later time because of the architecture that we have gone with.
Right, but some of your e-case systems also will be needing some kind of have to meet some kind of new requirement, I imagine, or the work given to the actual field workers.
Yeah, so the results of assessing the response data or supplementing that response data with administrative records is a different aspect of it, and I understand that. So for instance, real-time non-ID and the use of administrative records to supplement addresses that are coming to us in an incomplete fashion, that decision has been made, and while we have established it, again, we are using the service-oriented architecture and serving the data, and the e-case environment is capturing the data through the consumption of that service. But as the workload that needs to be addressed and managed by the e-case platform changes because of the decisions that would be made in the use of administrative records, the business rules will be updated. And Patty can tell you that the rules are not static rules where we coded. They could be changed. The interface of altering the rules is available, and that's what we are going to rely on to alter the way the workload for field operations based on administrative records. As it changes, the rules have to obviously change.
Right, and so the 2017 test did test some of these threads, obviously for the internet response. And then for the 2018 test, you'll also have the enumerators in NERFU, obviously. So I just would like a couple comments on your observations about the real-time goal and measures for the 2017 test. I mean, there were 80,000 housing units in it. I don't know how many got on what was the peak that got online to answer the questionnaire. I did a non-ID out of test area, and I thought it was pretty good. But anyway, if you have any results of that or what you're looking at there, and then for the 2018 test, like what are your anticipation of the real-timeness that all these different threads have to meet?
Yeah, so I mean, we are collecting data, the paradata and the metadata associated with the responses. We have an indication as to how the utilization of our hardware and servers was, but we have not completed the research on it. I think we will get to a point where maybe at the next PMR, we'll give some results on what the peak loads were, but we have means of collecting that information using the systems that we have for the 17 test. I know Subbu is here. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but okay, he's good. So, thank you. Yes, Dan.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Chase Gunner with FCW. Census has put out a couple of RFIs recently for commercial mobile devices and for cloud. For the devices, are you looking for one device that hosts a series of apps, or qualifying multiple kinds of devices to issue to enumerators? And what is the role of the still uncertain appropriations in the procurement and the testing of those?
So I'll take the first part, and I think Lisa will take the second part. So we are, I mean, we prefer to have, devices that are field division and the
Audrey,
field
I
directorate.
think the answer to the question is actually in the RFIs and in the
Yes.
request for proposals that we've put out. And maybe at this point, because we're in the midst of awarding the contracts, we should leave it with that. I see that
Okay,
Mike has
good.
left, and so I would prefer to kind of leave it with that at this point in time. What was the second half of your question, Chase? I'm sorry.
Oh, it was the role of the still uncertain appropriations in the procurement and then the testing.
Sure. So in terms of the contracts? So as I reported earlier at the beginning of the program management review, we're on schedule with the award, or on the schedule that we shared with the award of the 3 contracts that we're currently working on, the Device as a Service contract, the contract we refer to as FIT, and the fingerprinting and badging contract. Those are moving forward as planned.
And Jennifer, if you don't mind, talking about the language program, you said that the target was 60 languages. How many are currently supported, and what's still in testing or in development before 2018, and when are the target dates to achieve those milestones?
Okay, so the 60 languages was referring to the language assistance guides, and for the internet questionnaire, we're targeting approximately 10 languages for 2020. In 2016, we tested the languages in our instruments in Spanish, Chinese, and in Korean. And for the 18 tests, we are moving to continue with the Chinese questionnaire. And then with the 2020, we will be rolling out, when the language support plan comes out later this year, it will roll out all of the languages in that list. We have already done translations in the other languages. We're preparing in advance of these instruments being deployed. So we already have translations in Vietnamese, in Russian, moving towards with Tagalog and Arabic as well. But the comprehensive list will be available once our support plan is finalized.
Thank you.
I think Dan had a question.
Just two really quick things. My usual theme is that little words can matter a lot. So one in particular, the other part of my work life is issues related to crime statistics. Fraud is a criminal offense. So in terms of a fraud detection system, it's not quite, I think, what you're putting out there. It's perhaps an unnecessarily loaded word to have out there for something that's more improper response or something like that, as opposed to quote-unquote fraud. The second one, just a lighter question. It just comes to mind listening to and running through the battery of non-SEDCAP systems. Put most simply, is DAPS good? I'm not at all suggesting it needs to be revisited, looked at, pulled apart, or anything like that, but just that it's been around so long, and going forward with it as a legacy system, is it something that's been customized enough over the years that really comfortable with the capability of it? Is it something that is basically, top of the line for what the functionality that it needs to perform?
Yeah, so we did quite a bit of assessment on the capabilities of DAPS as they exist right now. The technology is supported by the company that, furnishes the software for us. And there is a guarantee of support even beyond 2020. But where we realize that there is a need for improvement is in the scalability aspect of it. And so we are working with our technical integrator to replace the hardware components and provide additional hardware resources for DAPS. And then, of course, the interfaces with the other systems have to be updated to use modern technology. So that is also happening as we speak.
Okay, I don't see anyone clamoring for additional questions. So we will move on to wrapping up. It's my first wrap-up. Okay, excellent. I know this was a lot of information that we presented today, and I do think that at each PMR, especially as we're getting closer and closer to the census itself, you can see that we're beginning to dive and spending more time on the details of the operations. I hope you see, as we do, working it every day, just what a large and complex and exciting time and opportunity it is to work on the census. My takeaways for you from today's presentations are, and I'm sure you know this, but I hope you take away the fact that we are absolutely committed to taking a complete and accurate census. And you can tell that we're well on our way to doing that. Today you heard about the fact that the 2017 test is well underway. You've heard that we stood up our census questionnaire assistance operation. You've heard that we're using our new eCase platform, particularly internet self-response, all associated with that test. You've heard that LUCA is moving full steam ahead and that we have wonderful engagement from the governmental entities that will be participating with us. And you've heard that we're continuing to solidify our plans and our operations and our designs, both for the end-to-end test and for the census itself. So while there are still challenges and work to be done, we are well on our way to the plans and our complete execution of the 2020 census. I would just like to take a moment, and I hope you'll join me as well, to thank today's presenters and to thank the staff that did all the work to make today possible for us, so please. And with that, I'd like to thank you as well for joining us this afternoon. I look forward to seeing you at our next program management review, and I know that I'll see many, many of you in the months in between. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.